Hello everyone and welcome to the Backtracking episode proper of the band Knots. We will start with the band's debut album, We Are Knots, subverting the self-titled debut trope, and I can't really complain about that, always nice when that happens. Released in 2014 through Garner Records, I couldn't find Sweet Naffle than a producer, so how about we try something new and assume that the band did it themselves. See, one joke may slip away, but the other one gets to stay. Anyway, one thing that I've come to realise, especially in this season in particular, is that I don't often cover a band genre in my very brief history segments, because I save them for the actual episodes, and Knots' genre fits comfortably into the noise punk / noise rock genre. Now, as a rule, I listen to a lot of punk, and a lot of rock too, but noise is often something that's always been more obscure to me, much like the band themselves. I mean, an all-female noise punk band isn't exactly something that I come across all that often, and I doubt that most people do in the world in general. But that doesn't really matter a lot, as this album is indeed pretty good, as we hear from the intro song, Insect Eyes. Now, I'll be honest, I think this is because I don't seek out much noise music, but it took me a while to get into this album at first. I mean, I get it, it's a debut, it'll be a bit rough in areas, but when it's a genre that I'm not familiar with, there is a bit more of a disconnect, well, for me personally anyway. But luckily, this album does manage to iron out those rough edges as it carries on. The sound has got the yelpiness of punk rock with the brain-crunching production of noise rock, which I presume was the main goal. Having Alexandra on keyboards to help flesh it out was a great choice too, I feel, and I'd argue that she gives the best performance here, making the music sound clear even at its most confusing points. The structure and sound are pretty straightforward, cutting through the album's short length with a good pace, and it has a sense of fun to it too, and the band sound good, the production manages to boost the overall sound, and the lyrics have a good focus on darker themes like religion, political corruption, and addiction, I think. My favourite song goes to Static. The band take a difficult to get into genre and make it coherent while cultivating an organic sound through a short but really sweet experience. Next up is the band's second album, Cosmetic. Released in 2016, it came out through Garner Records in America, and it's the band's first re-release in Europe via Heavenly Records as well, so there you go. So I couldn't find too much in the ways of promotion for this one. I would presume that there was a tour involved, and they released a couple of standalone singles in between this and their debut, namely Virgin Mary and Shelf Life, neither of which actually made it onto Cosmetic. Which leads us into the first song proper on this album, Blank Reflection. It is honestly a good opening track, and one of the things that I picked up on immediately was the usage of more keyboards. Which in itself is somewhat ironic, since this would be the band's last album with Alexandra Eastburn fulfilling the keyboard role, let alone the last Knots album to have that instrument at all. But it's nice that it gets to see more use here, and it does start to make the band genre a bit more accessible, especially on this album. I think the production has a lot to do with that too, and presuming that it is the band doing it, I'm glad that they made things smoother this time around. For those who have been watching thus far, and if you have been, then God, more power to you, that was one of my main gripes with their debut, that it felt a bit too rough, but then again, very few debuts are all the way perfect. This one, however, there's a bit more of a balance to it. The time is divided more evenly with seeing what the band can get away with, and it still has that fuzzy, mellow tone of their debut, but with more upbeat instrumental work as well. There's more usage of cymbals, more guitar solos, which I always find is a nice new addition, and the lyrics are still dark, talking about life, reality and deceit, and yes, I did pull some of that from their Bandcamp description. I'll leave it up to you to guess what I did. Regardless, it's a pretty good evolution of their debut, and they thankfully managed to iron out the issues that album had as well. My favourite song goes to the 7-minute closing track, Entertain Me. Cosmetic tackles the band's usual subject matter with new themes, better production, and really good vocal chops from Natalie Hoffman, not to mention the entire band just kicking a lot of ass. And finally we reach the band's third album, titled 3. The meme giveth, and the meme taketh awayeth. Released in 2019 through Garner and Heavenly in the US and Europe respectively, possibly produced by the band themselves, this would be their first without Alexandra Eastburn on keyboards. But oddly, to clash against something I said during the covering of Cosmetic, there is still some keyboard work, or at least some synth or electronic stuff that I think may have been programmed in. I couldn't tell you, mostly because I couldn't find a lot of information about that, nor do I have any information about this album's promotional material, if there was a tour or anything. All I can really tell you about it for sure is that this was my first Knots album. So, fuck it. We start with the intro song titled Low, and yes, it does set the tone for the album, but in a different way than you'd usually think. Something that I like to think that I picked up on when I first heard this album when it came out last year, I feel like there's something of a concept to it. Even some of the song titles feel a bit like a sentence being strung together, sort of like the Chariot did with their albums, but feeling more nonsensical for these guys somehow. Still, I like to think that there's a story here, using the themes of abuse and relationships and manipulation to tell that sort of story. There are points where it feels like lead singer Natalie Hoffman plays a character trying to keep her composure in a constantly pressuring time, and if that was the goal, then kudos. However, on the other hand, if the goal was just to make a really good and entertaining album, then kudos because they did that too. I like that the keyboards don't take over so much precedence, which makes sense as they're technically not even really here, and the bulk of this album is surprisingly bass-driven too. And I know I didn't mention this on previous albums, but the band sounds as good here as they did before, which is to say very flipping. Good, I mean. Very flipping good. The 3-year time gap between albums paid off, longest gap and all that, and the band have proved that they still sound fine without Alexandra. As much as I'll miss her being in the band, I thought she really did a good job while she was with them. The production and lyrics are good too, and the album has a bouncier quality to it, which I do always enjoy, as you know. My favourite song goes to Rational Actor. 3 is a good step forwards for the band, and also a really good showcase for their talent, and hopefully we'll get a 4th album before long. And so, that about does it for Knots, a band that hasn't been around for too long, but they are starting to make an impression on my grumpy non-good music have an ass. In the next Backtracking episode, I'll be talking about Sheffield Engerland's own Rilo Tomasi. The next thing I'll most likely see you for before that will be a PBW stream on Tuesday, and possibly Music of the Month on Wednesday. Yeah, I think that's the way they're going to go, and then Backtracking of Rilo Tomasi some point after that. And as always, thank you for watching, you're awesome, bye bye.